When my husband had just died, my only son looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You are useless now. Go find somewhere else to die." My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 68 years old, and for more than 40 years, I was the keeper of a family, the silent backbone behind a husband and a son. But in the span of 2 days after Charles's funeral, my son Andrew and his wife Victoria tried to strip me of everything that was mine. They claimed my late husband's $29 million lake house, his $41 million in stocks, and then told me I was nothing but a burden. I still remember the way Andrew's hand shoved $200 into mine as if I were a beggar on his doorstep. Victoria forced a polite smile, her voice dripping with fake sweetness as she said, "Be independent, Eleanor. You'll get used to it." I packed 2 small suitcases and 1 wooden box that held Charles's pocket watch. That watch was the only thing I clung to as I stood in the living room of the house where I had raised Andrew, cooked for every birthday, and nursed Charles through his illnesses. Andrew and Victoria were already measuring the walls, talking about which furniture they would replace, as though I had never existed there. I paused at the doorway, the evening sun spilling across the hardwood floors I had polished 1,000 times. I turned once, not to cry, not to beg, but simply to remember. Then I walked out in silence, carrying 4 decades of my life in 2 suitcases. Out on the porch, Victoria adjusted her designer sunglasses and whispered something into Andrew's ear. He chuckled as if dismissing me was nothing more than crossing off a line on a to-do list. The BMW's trunk popped open and my son tossed my bags inside like discarded trash. They had everything: my husband's lakefront estate, his investments, the life we built. But they looked me in the eye and said I was useless. What they did not know was that 48 hours later, in a lawyer's office, the real will would be read, and their faces would drain of every ounce of color. I stepped off the porch slowly, gripping the pocket watch in my hand. Charles's voice echoed in my memory. Years ago, he had pressed that watch into my palm and said, "When the day comes that you feel reduced to just a wife or just a mother, remember that you are Eleanor first." At that moment, I did not weep. I did not argue. I let the silence answer for me, because sometimes silence is the loudest kind of power. The motel smelled of bleach and fried onions. The air conditioner rattled like a shopping cart over broken asphalt. Paint curled from the walls in narrow strips, exposing a tired green underneath. I set 2 suitcases by the dresser, placed the wooden box on the nightstand, and turned the lock until it clicked. The click was small, but decisive. A bedspread with blue diamonds waited in the center of the room. I smoothed it with my palm and felt the day trying to slide off my skin like water that does not wash. I made myself breathe in and out. Small, useful breaths. The day had been a storm without thunder. Words spoken without shouting can bruise just the same. Andrew's sentence kept circling the way the air conditioner shuddered through its cycle. "You are useless now. Find somewhere else to die." I pressed my lips together until the words had no place to sit. I would not decorate this room with them. I would not let them hang on the lamp like a scarf. There was a narrow desk under the room's single window. Outside, a neon sign blinked. Vacancy. Half the bulbs were gone. I pulled the chair closer, opened my purse, and counted the $200 my son had shoved into my hand. I folded the bills once, then once again, and slid them under the wooden box for later. In the bathroom, the mirror was spotted. Lemon cleaner tried and failed to hide the old smoke that had settled in the grout. I returned to the bed and opened the box. Charles's pocket watch rested inside like a small sun cooled by time. The brass was warm and familiar. The engraving caught the weak light. To Eleanor, for the hours I did not earn. The chain pulled in my palm like a narrow river. I wound the stem and held the case to my ear. The tick was steady. It did not care who owned houses or stocks. It cared about seconds, about showing up for each one, no matter how ordinary they seemed. A memory sat down beside me. Andrew was 8, his cheeks flushed with fever, his eyes glossy and large. Winter pressed against our kitchen windows. The lake, beyond the pines, lay like pewter. I wrung a washcloth and laid it across his forehead. He whispered that the light hurt. I dimmed the room and sat on the floor next to the couch, counting his breaths and the seconds between coughs, because counting made time feel less cruel. Charles called from the office to ask what we needed. I asked for crackers, ginger ale. Quiet. Back in the motel, I pressed the cool case to my cheek. The air conditioner rattled again, a stubborn engine that refused to give up. Somewhere a television laughed at a joke I could not hear. I was surprised by the open space in my chest where panic should have been. Perhaps grief is a kind of tidying. The body throws out what does not matter, so it can carry what does. I sat still and let the quiet settle into the corners. I spoke a small prayer with no address, not because I expected an answer, but because I needed to hear my own voice in this room that did not know me. The words were plain. Keep me upright. Keep me kind. Keep me clear. I did not ask to be spared. Pain. I asked to be kept from becoming hard. I placed the watch on my sternum and listened to the tick meet the beat of my heart. 2 honest sounds. No arguing between them, only rhythm. On the desk, I found a paper notepad and wrote 3 lines. Lake house, keys, bank, statements, lawyer, appointment. The letters were neat and practical. The handwriting of a woman who had made lists for decades. My hand did not shake. I tore the page along the perforation and slid it under the box with the money. Tomorrow had a shape now, a spine I could hold. I lifted the watch again and let Charles's voice cross the small distance between memory and air. Do not forget you are Eleanor, I remembered. Morning was pale when I left the motel with 2 suitcases and Charles's pocket watch warm in my palm. I took the bus because pride costs less than a cab. I was going to see the lawyer who knew our family better than most relatives. Whitman and Blake, attorneys at law, filled the 2nd floor of a brick building that used to be a bank. Brass letters on glass, a bell when the door swung, coffee and copier toner in the air. The receptionist, her bun neat and tight, asked my name. Eleanor Whitmore. She checked a screen and offered me a seat. On the wall, a photo of Charles shaking hands with Mr. Whitman at the lake house closing. Charles's small smile. When the receptionist led me down the hall, diplomas lined both sides. Mr. Whitman waited in his doorway, tall, gray at the temples, a tie with tiny anchors. He stepped forward, concern honest on his face. Eleanor, I am surprised it has taken you this long to come by. At the will reading, Andrew told me you were too distraught to attend. The sentence struck like a door closing. I stood still while the printers hummed behind us. I did not know there had been a reading, I said. Andrew told you I was too distraught? He did, Whitman said, troubled. He said you asked him to handle everything, that you needed rest. I was washing platters at the reception, I answered. They were measuring my living room. He ushered me inside. The office had a window over traffic, a wall of law books, a chessboard mid-game. He poured coffee and opened a thick file, setting 2 envelopes on the desk. Notices? Of probate went to the house and to your email. Both were returned. Andrew told me your email had changed and that you were staying with friends. He changed the password. Saying it out loud made the floor less slippery. This process should have included you, Whitman said. Charles was meticulous. He intended clarity. I am sorry you were not in the room. I am not here for sorrow, I told him. I am here to stand where I belong. Good, he said. Here is what we will do. I will file an amended notice listing you as primary. Contact. Come back at 3 and I will read the will to you in full. No summaries. I will contact the bank to request precautionary holds. Andrew will be notified you came. Transparency is required, but he does not direct anything in this office. I nodded. The coffee smelled honest. The watch pressed its tick into my hand. Mr. Whitman slid a leather folder across the desk. From now on, every document we review will be copied for you and stored here. We will set a new email and contact number for legal correspondence. I wrote an address Andrew did not know and signed a small form. My signature looked like itself. Again. The receptionist knocked and handed in a stack of returned certified mail. Marked moved. No forwarding. "Did you move, Eleanor?" Whitman asked. "No," I replied. "I was moved." He let the truth stand. "Tell me what happened after the service," I told him, keeping it clean. Andrew pressed $200 into my hand like a tip and called it independence. Victoria smiled with pity and told me I would get used to it. They measured rooms as if home were a spreadsheet. I carried 2 suitcases and the watch. I closed the door without slamming it. Whitman listened without blinking. When I finished, the room felt like fresh air. "This is wrong," he said. "Not only unkind, wrong. Law exists to create order. It should not erase dignity. We will repair both." He showed me a cover letter in Charles's handwriting, dated 6 months ago. The even script steadied me and hurt me at once. "At 3, he said, "we will go through everything line by line." "I prefer lines," I told him. "People hide inside summaries." He almost smiled. "You have a lawyer's patience." "No," I said. "I have a widow's." He stood with me and shook my hand. "You belong in every room where your life is being decided." I carried the folder into the hall. The receptionist offered a lid for my coffee. I walked back into winter light. The watch kept time against my steps. Distraught. The word echoed like a label stuck to the wrong file. Men have used it to fold women out of important pages. Today, it had been used on me. I can grieve and still read. I can bury my husband and still show up for the reading of the life I helped build. Andrew had told the lawyer I was too distraught to attend the reading of my own story. That sentence tasted like metal. I decided to keep it on my tongue until it taught me something. Then I would spit it out. At the corner, a bakery warmed its windows. I traded $2 for a roll and ate half while watching the courthouse flag move in the pale sky. I tucked the rest in my pocket. I am not dramatic by nature. I prefer lists to speeches, so I made one in my head. At 3:00, show up. Sit straight. Ask clear questions. Request copies. Sign only what I understand. Let silence do some of the talking. I left the bakery and kept walking. Storefront glass reflected a woman with careful hair. "You belong," I told her. "Act like it." At a crosswalk, I pressed the button. I crossed with the calm of someone who refuses to be hurried while doing the right thing. 3:00 would come. Paper has a way of correcting the noise people make with their mouths. I held the watch. It ticked like a small drum under my skin. Whatever waited in that file, I would meet it by name and let it know mine. At 3:00 sharp, I returned to Whitman's office. The receptionist guided me to the same room with the chessboard still waiting mid-game. Mr. Whitman rose from behind his desk, buttoned his jacket, and motioned for me to sit. The leather chair creaked under me, carrying the sound of old trials. He placed a thick envelope on the desk, slid it open with a brass letter opener, and drew out the official copy of Charles Whitmore's last will and testament. His voice was careful, measured, every syllable weighed as if dignity itself depended on accuracy. This is the executed will of Charles Whitmore, dated 6 months prior to his passing. It was signed in the presence of 2 witnesses and notarized. There is no ambiguity about its validity. He looked at me before beginning. "Eleanor, are you ready?" I nodded. My hands rested on Charles's pocket watch in my lap, its weight steadying me. He began. "To my beloved wife, Eleanor Whitmore, I leave our primary residence, the lake house at Oakwood Shore, together with all furnishings, household items, and personal effects therein. In addition, I bequeath 75% of my financial assets, including but not limited to stock holdings, accounts, and investments currently valued at over $30 million. I inhaled slowly. The words filled the room like a tide. For weeks I had been told I was useless, a burden, a woman with nothing. Now the law itself was declaring otherwise. Whitman continued, "To my son, Andrew Whitmore, I leave $11 million, representing 25% of my total assets, to be distributed through a trust. The trust is conditional. Andrew's inheritance shall be maintained only if, following my death, he demonstrates continued respect and dignity toward his mother. In the event that he fails, all sums revert to Eleanor Whitmore in full." The room fell silent except for the tick of the clock and the distant hum of traffic below. My throat tightened. My son had told me I was useless. He had thrown me out with $200. In that single act, he had already forfeited everything his father left for him. Whitman folded his hands. "Charles was very specific. He wanted to ensure you were protected, Eleanor. He worried about Andrew's behavior. He instructed me personally that your well-being was to remain the cornerstone of this estate." The memory hit me as sharply as the scent of Charles's cologne. 6 months ago, on a quiet evening, Charles had sat across from me at the kitchen table. His heart had been weak. He knew it. He held my hands in his. "I worry, Ellie," he had whispered. "Andrew has grown careless with people. Money blinds him. He forgets that respect is not optional. I need you to remember this. If he fails you, the law will not." I had hushed him then, telling him not to be morbid. But his eyes had stayed steady. "Promise me you won't forget yourself. Promise me you'll stand when the time comes." Those words folded back over me like a quilt stitched with foresight. Charles had seen it all coming. He had known that grief could make me vulnerable, that Andrew might twist sorrow into opportunity. He had left me not only assets, but armor. Whitman cleared his throat. "Eleanor, do you understand what this means?" I nodded, my voice low but steady. "It means I am not homeless. It means my husband did not abandon me to pity. It means my son's cruelty has already written his own loss." Whitman's expression softened. "Exactly. You are the rightful heir to the house, to the majority of the estate, and now to the conditional portion as well, since Andrew's conduct has been demonstrably hostile. We will file the paperwork to secure it. Legally, you hold the cards." The pocket watch ticked against my palm, louder now. Not a relic, but a pulse. For the first time since Charles's death, I felt something return to my spine. A length, a weight, a certainty. I thought of Andrew's words, "You are useless now." They had burned like acid, but here, written in legal ink, Charles had inscribed the opposite. "Eleanor, you are necessary. You are deserving. You are safeguarded." I closed my eyes for a moment. Behind my lids, I saw Charles smiling softly across the chessboard, the way he always played 2 moves ahead. He had set the pieces so that even in death, he would shield me from betrayal. When I opened my eyes, Whitman was still watching me. Carefully. I straightened in the chair. "File whatever you must," I said. "But understand, Mr. Whitman, this is not about greed. This is about remembering who I am. For too long, I let myself be reduced to wife, to mother, to background. Today, I remember I am Eleanor Whitmore." Whitman nodded. "That is exactly how Charles intended it." I rose from the chair, the pocket watch clenched firmly in my hand. In that instant, the motel walls, the $200, the insult of being called useless, all of it fell behind me like discarded skin. I walked out of the office into the winter light, knowing one truth, clear and bright. I had value, and the law itself was standing beside me. The call came before dawn. My phone buzzed across the motel nightstand. Andrew's name lit the screen. Answered. "There is a mistake," he said. I cannot access any of the accounts. The brokerage says everything is frozen. What did you do? There is no mistake, I replied. Your father believed I still have value. Value is not the point, he snapped. Liquidity is. I have payments scheduled. The utilities on the house are due. The portfolio needs attention. This freeze will hurt performance. You moved into a house that is not yours, I said. You tried to manage assets that are not yours. The performance you are worried about is not your concern. He paused, then chose instruction. Do you even understand the positions? Andrew's voice was tight, impatient. We have options that require timing. If you sit on your hands, you will burn money. I am trying to prevent that. You are trying to control what does not belong to you, I said. You told Mr. Whitman I was too distraught to attend the will reading. You told me to leave my home. You pressed cash into my hand like a tip. Those were choices. Choices have consequences. A click sounded, and Victoria's voice arrived bright and brittle. Let me talk to her. Eleanor, this is unnecessary drama. You do not know how to handle investments. Leaving money in your hands is wasteful. We are protecting Charles's legacy. No, I said. You are taking what you want and calling it protection. You are emotional, she said smoothly. Tomorrow we can meet at the house and go over documents. You will sign limited power of attorney so Andrew can act. That way we avoid fees and slippage. I will not sign a paper that removes my dignity, I said. Andrew returned sharp. Dignity does not pay taxes. We are trying to save you from yourself. I let the sentence cool before answering. Dignity is why I am not signing away control to the two people who told me I was useless. We never said useless. He snapped. You said exactly that, I replied. And if you had not, the way you treated me wrote the same word, Victoria whispered near the receiver, then spoke again softer. We love you, Eleanor. Be practical. Markets punish hesitation. If you insist on this freeze, value will evaporate. You will be the one who loses. Law will not evaporate, I said. Law will name what you did. You can call it practicality. I will call it theft. Andrew's tone narrowed. Are you threatening us with police? I am stating the truth, I said. Mr. Whitman filed the proper notices. The accounts are secured until the court completes its process. You will receive communication through him. This is absurd, he said. Dad trusted me with these decisions. I rested my palm on Charles's pocket watch. Your father trusted me with the home, with the majority of the assets, and with myself. He trusted you on one condition: respect. That clause is subjective, Victoria said quickly. No judge can measure feelings. Behavior can be measured, I said. A locksmith's receipt, a moving invoice, a hotel charge the night I was told to leave. Passwords changed without consent. Those are not feelings. Andrew tried. The softer door. We are family. Yes, I said, which is why I offered silence instead of a scene on the lawn, which is why I am speaking calmly now. Family should make us better. You chose to be smaller. You cannot maintain that property, he argued. The stairs alone are a hazard. We are relocating to manage it. The house stood while I scrubbed its floors for 40 years, I said. It will survive my steps. Victoria sighed. Fine. Here is a reasonable proposal. You keep the lake house as your residence. We take over the investments so they do not rot. We will provide a monthly stipend. You are offering me an allowance from my own estate, I said. It is efficient, she answered. Think of it as modern caregiving. I am not your dependent, I said. I am the widow of the man whose name is on those statements. And I can read. Mom, this is time-sensitive, Andrew said. Be reasonable. I was reasonable for decades, I said. Reasonable kept the lights on and your lunches packed. Reasonable let you speak over me at my own table. Today I am not sacrificing clarity for politeness. So that is it, he said. You would rather burn the account than admit you need help? I would rather honor the truth than live on a lie, I said. Silence pulled. Victoria breathed in, then sharpened. You do not have the expertise to manage a portfolio of this size. You will make mistakes. I will make decisions, I said. I will also hire professionals who respect their client. You think Wittmann is on your side because he likes you, Andrew said. He likes billable hours. He liked my husband enough to follow his instructions, I said. And he likes the law? Last chance, Victoria said. Meet us tonight. Sign the limited power of attorney. We will stop the freeze and bring the accounts back online. No, I said. 2 words. No, Andrew. No, Victoria. You will regret this, Andrew said. I already regret many things, I answered. Let this not be one of them. He started to speak, then the line clicked. I set the phone down. The room smelled like old carpet. The watch ticked. I lifted the blind. The parking lot showed a film of frost. A cart rattled over cracked concrete. I opened the watch and watched the second hand sweep. My hands were steady. I was not shouting. I was not pleading. I was naming. Theft is not an insult. It is a label where it belongs. In the glass, I saw a woman in a sweater and a room with privacy. I nodded to her. We had work to do. We were beginning. The knock came in the middle of a gray afternoon. The motel walls were thin. The air still smelled like cleaner and dust. And I was making instant coffee with the machine that hissed like an old radiator. When I opened the door, I saw Nora standing there in her heavy coat, her hair tucked under a scarf, cheeks pink from the cold. Nora had been my neighbor for nearly 30 years. She was 70, a widow herself, and once a nurse. She had walked beside me through more than one season of my life. Never flashy, always steady. Seeing her outside that motel door nearly undid me. Eleanor, she said, her voice plain, not pitying. I heard what happened. I couldn't sit at home while you were here alone. I stepped back and let her in. The room looked smaller with her in it, but she carried a kind of clean presence like a window cracked open. She set down a bag, bread, cheese, and a thermos of soup. Then she sat on the chair by the window as though she were in my kitchen again, not this square box of rented air. I poured the coffee anyway, embarrassed by the thin paper cups. She held hers without complaint, warming her hands. I saw them, she said finally. I was out front when they arrived with the suitcases. I thought at first Andrew was moving you somewhere better, maybe closer to me, but then I saw your face. I knew. I stared down at the watch in my lap. Its brass face caught the dull motel light. I have watched you sweep those steps, Eleanor. I've watched you rake leaves, shovel snow, plant flowers, scrub windows until they gleamed. That house, every corner of it, was carried on your back. 40 years of meals, birthdays, sick nights, quiet mornings. It was never just Charles's, never just Andrew's. It was yours. Her words landed heavier than Andrew's had, not because they hurt, but because they pulled truth back into the room. They told me I was useless, I whispered. Nora leaned forward. Useless doesn't host every Thanksgiving dinner until her knees swell. Useless doesn't work part-time just to help with tuition. Useless doesn't hold a man's hand through chemo or rock a child through fever. I know what useless looks like. Eleanor, and it isn't you. Tears came sharp and uninvited, but they didn't fall in sobs. They slid down quietly, hot lines across my cheeks. I pressed my fingers to my lips, half in shame, half in thanks. Nora did not reach to wipe. Them. She let them be, like a nurse who knows some wounds need air. Instead, she offered the soup. I took it, the steam rising like comfort itself. I don't know who I am without that house, I admitted. For years, I thought I was only the woman behind the meals and the mopped floors. They took it in one afternoon. No, Nora said firmly. They took your keys. They didn't take you. Eleanor is still Eleanor. The house was never the sum of you. It was the witness to you. I closed my eyes, holding on to that. She said, her cup down and added softer now. I've been alone longer than you. When my husband died, I thought I was nothing. Then I remembered I had been everything to him. And that counted. Sometimes we need someone else to remind us of what we carried, so it doesn't vanish in our own doubt. Her words bent something inside me back toward its shape. I smiled then, weak but real. Thank you, Nora. She nodded, almost brisk. Eat the soup before it cools. And remember this, Eleanor. The law may take time, but truth will walk into the room eventually. Don't let them trick you into silence. I nodded again, and for the first time in days, I felt my spine lengthen. That afternoon, when she left, the room was still the same. Thin towels, buzzing heater, cracked plaster. But I was not the same. I sat with the pocket watch and the thermos now empty, and I let one thought root deeper than the doubt. I had been seen, and I had been named. Not useless, but essential. The next meeting with Mr. Whitman was scheduled for a Thursday morning. The winter light was thin, the sidewalk strewn with salt, and the bus ride rattled my bones. I carried a folder with notes. I had started keeping dates, words spoken, receipts from the motel, even the scrap of paper Andrew had pressed into my palm with the $200 scrawled on it. I had learned something important. Evidence is not only for lawyers, it is a language for the silenced. Whitman welcomed me into his office with the same gravity as before. On the desk, the will lay open beside a fresh notepad. He adjusted his glasses, folded his hands, and looked at me. Eleanor, I need you to hear this clearly. Andrew has already violated the trust conditions. By telling you to leave your home, by calling you useless, by denying you access to what is rightfully yours, he has triggered the clause Charles included. My stomach tightened. So the $11 million he was left is forfeited? Whitman nodded, his tone even but firm. All of it reverts to you. Legally, he no longer has any claim. The room seemed to shift. I sat straighter, my hand finding the pocket watch in my bag. The brass was warm against my palm, as if Charles himself pressed my hand closed. I will file a petition in probate. Court this afternoon, Whitman continued. We will attach an affidavit and supporting documents. Once the judge reviews the language of the will and the evidence of his conduct, the matter will be sealed. What evidence do we have? I asked quietly. Your testimony. My own record of what he told me, that you were too distraught to attend the will reading. That is misrepresentation. We also have notarized accounts from the bank and the broker, noting his attempts to access funds without authority. He tapped the folder I had brought. And the details you recorded. Dates, receipts, the motel bill, even the cash he handed. You. All of it paints a clear picture. I exhaled slowly. I had not thought my scribbled notes meant much, but in this office, they became stones in a foundation. Later that day, Andrew stormed into Whitman's office. I was already there, sitting in the corner chair with my coat folded across my lap. Victoria followed behind him, her perfume sharp, her face tight. This is outrageous, Andrew shouted, slamming his hand on Whitman's desk. You cannot strip me of my inheritance because of some misunderstanding. That clause is vague. Respect is subjective. Whitman's voice was steady. It is not subjective when your mother is forced out of her home, handed cash like a servant, and told she is useless. It is not subjective when you lied to me, telling me she was too distraught to attend the will reading. The law recognizes behavior, Mr. Whitmore, and your behavior invalidates your claim. Andrew's face flushed deep red. I am his only son. That has to mean something. It means Charles gave you an opportunity to honor your mother, Whitman said. You chose not to. The will anticipated that possibility. Victoria stepped forward, her voice smoother. Eleanor, listen, you do not want this fight. The legal costs, the publicity. It will wear you down. Let Andrew manage the estate. You keep the house. Enjoy your retirement. Everyone wins. I finally spoke, my voice calm. No, Victoria. Everyone does not win when lies govern the room. My husband gave me the house, the assets, and a condition. Your husband broke that condition the moment he opened his mouth. I do not need more fights. I need the truth filed where it belongs. Andrew turned to me, eyes narrowing. You would do this to your own son? I held his gaze. You did this to yourself. His fists clenched. Then maybe I should draft a correction. Dad made mistakes. He was not in his right mind. We can produce a prior version of the will. Whitman's chair scraped back as he stood. Careful, Andrew. Forging or producing false documents is fraud. It is a felony. If you pursue that path, you will not only lose your inheritance, you may face criminal charges. Andrew's jaw flexed. Victoria placed a hand on his arm, whispering something I could not hear. His body remained rigid, but his eyes darted between me and Whitman. In that silence, I felt something turn inside me. A week ago, I would have shrunk into the corner, begged him not to be angry, begged him to soften. Now, I sat still, watching him rage, knowing the law stood between us. Power had shifted. I could feel it in the calmness of my own breathing. Andrew finally spat the words, This isn't over. You think you've won because of a technicality, but money can be moved. Paper can be rewritten. I'll find a way. Whitman's eyes hardened. Then you will find yourself in front of a judge for more than inheritance. They left the office, Victoria tugging at Andrew's sleeve, his shoulders tight with fury. The door shut, leaving the smell of her perfume and the echo of his anger. Whitman turned to me. You handled that with remarkable composure. I didn't handle it, I said quietly. The law did. I just sat still long enough to let it. He nodded. That is sometimes the strongest stance. When I left the building, the air felt different. The cold was still there, the sidewalk still salted, but something had shifted in the marrow of my bones. For the first time, I was not the one being moved. I was the one choosing where to stand. That night at the motel, I spread the documents across the small desk. My handwriting filled the margins with dates and reminders. I was no longer writing to survive, I was preparing a case. Each receipt, each note, each memory became part of the record that would anchor me against Andrew's storm. I thought again of Charles's words that evening at the kitchen table. If he fails you, the law will not. It was happening exactly as he foresaw. Andrew had failed me, and the law was speaking louder than his rage. I touched the pocket watch and let it tick against my palm. I realized then that this was the beginning of the reversal. I had been forced out, called useless, handed scraps. But now I held the house, the assets, the evidence, and the law itself. Andrew was left with anger and a fading claim. The power no longer lived in his voice. It lived in the silence I chose, in the signatures I gathered, in the steady tick of a watch that had never stopped keeping time. I went back to the house with Mr. Whitman's paralegal, a steady woman named Ruth, who carried a clipboard and the quiet authority of someone who does not waste words. We were not there to fight or to take back rooms. We were there to inventory what the court would need. The driveway was crusted with ice. My key still turned in the side door. The alarm beeped, its familiar note, and then yielded to the code Ruth typed with practiced fingers. Silence folded over the kitchen like a heavy blanket. I did not linger. I did not touch the bowls or the apron still hanging behind the pantry door. We moved as if we were crossing a river on stones, one careful step at a time. Ruth read off categories. I opened drawers. When we reached Charles's study, I stopped in the doorway and let the room greet me. Books that still smelled faintly of cedar. The old desk with a shine worn smooth by his forearms. The chessboard frozen in a position that had waited 6 months for him to return. Ruth nodded toward the credenza. Safe is there. Combination should be in the file Mr. Whitman gave you. My hands knew the dial. Charles had taught me the numbers. The week we moved in, reciting them like a silly rhyme. I turned, listened for the soft catches. The door opened with the gentle sigh of oiled hinges. Inside were the usual papers, passports, the deed, insurance, and then I saw it. A thumb drive in a small velvet pouch with a handwritten label in Charles's neat block script. For Eleanor. Something in my chest widened and tightened at once. I held it like a charm and stepped back from the safe. Ruth watched my face and understood enough not to ask. We finished our list. She photographed the shelves. We locked the study and set the alarm again. Andrew had stripped me of rooms with his mouth. Charles, from beyond, had placed a key in my hand. At the motel, I plugged the drive into my old laptop. The screen lit and a folder appeared. Start here. Inside, there was a single audio file and several subfolders named letters, statements, instructions. I clicked the audio first because my fingers refused any other order. The speakers crackled, and then his voice arrived, patient and whole. Ellie, he said, using the name he only spoke when he wanted me to release my jaw. If you are hearing this, it means Andrew has forgotten what I feared most. Do not hesitate. The law is your backbone. I pressed a hand to my chest. The room settled. Around the sound of him, he continued without anger. That was Charles's power. He could say hard things and leave room in them for dignity. I thought I had more time to teach him what a promise feels like, he said. Maybe I failed. Maybe I gave him too much ease. That is on me. But you are not the payment for my mistakes. I have set matters in order to protect you. In the letters folder, you will find a note addressed to Andrew to be read only if he challenges the will. In the statements folder, you will find records that map every holding. Nothing is hidden from you. In the instructions, there are steps to take with Whitman and the bank. If he treats you without respect, the clause triggers. That is the line I drew. I am sorry to make you carry a line. I know you prefer bridges. I swallowed against the ache. He had seen me. He had always seen me. For years, I had confused quiet with invisibility. The voice in my motel proved I had been wrong. I expect grief will make noise around you, Charles went on. Let it pass like weather. You do not have to argue with a storm. Write down what happens. Dates, times, words. Let the paper speak when people forget how. If you feel small, hold the pocket watch. It kept time through worse storms than this. It belonged to my father and then to me. I wanted to belong to the woman who kept us both honest. I paused the audio and let the stillness take a breath. The heater's rattle returned. A car door slammed outside. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. I wiped my eyes and pressed play again. I have included a letter for Nora, he said. She has been more than a neighbor. She is a witness. Ask her to tell the truth. If anyone asks who kept the house standing, people will try to turn feelings into fog. Witnesses cut fog. A smaller file name caught my eye. Apology. I clicked it. His voice was closer, as if he had moved his chair toward mine. I am sorry I sometimes spoke about money as if it were mine to explain to you. You knew more than I let you prove. I am sorry for the nights I let exhaustion make me blunt. Here is a truth you need to practice telling yourself. You were not background. You were the frame. Without a frame, the picture slides to the floor. I cried then, not because of the estate or the fight or even Andrew's words. I cried because the man I loved had done the quiet work of love all the way to the end. He had not only organized, accounts he had organized courage for me to borrow. I opened the letters folder. There was a document titled to Andrew, another name to Eleanor. I read mine first. It was short. Ellie, if you need to hear this in writing, you are allowed to outlive everyone's version of you, including mine. Use the house as you wish, buy new paint, leave the windows open, learn the names of your own mornings. I laughed, once through tears because that sounded like Charles, practical and tender in the same line. I did not open Andrew's letter. It was not time. He would earn or forfeit those words later. In the statements folder, spreadsheets appeared with dates and annotations in Charles's tidy style. He had underlined a note. Ask Whitman to set up a separate advisory team, not the one Andrew favors. Cross-check fees. He had circled an account and attached a PDF of a policy with a paragraph highlighted. Survivorship details clear as daylight. He had thought of the places my doubt would try to sit, and had placed a chair of facts there first. In the instructions folder, there were step-by-step lists. Who to call, what to say, what not to sign. He even wrote scripts for the conversations he suspected would arrive. If Andrew raises his voice, breathe. Say, I am not signing anything today. Direct him to Whitman. If Victoria uses care as a reason to ask for control, say, I already have care. Thank you. The law is sufficient. He knew their rhythms. He knew mine. He had given me a way to stay myself while refusing them. At the end of the audio, his voice lowered. If there is a day when you feel alone in a room where you should not be, remember this. I put you there on purpose. I am not here to back you, but the paperwork is. Hold that watch and stand. The file ended. The room was not empty. It was inhabited by the thinnest outline of his presence, a kindness with edges. I sat for a long time with my hands on the laptop and the watch cooling back to room temperature. Twist is a word writers use. Life gives it to you like a path suddenly turning. Charles had foreseen the turn. He had left signs at each bend. The twist was not that he controlled me from beyond. It was that he trusted me to control myself. Ruth called to confirm that the key filing had gone through. I thanked her, and then emailed Whitman from the new address we had set, attaching copies of the instruction list so he would know exactly what Charles had placed in my hands. He called within the hour. I am not surprised, he said. Your husband planned as if storms were inevitable. He knew our weather, I answered. After we hung up, I opened one more file in the letters folder, a scanned copy of Charles's handwriting to Nora. I did not read it. That too would wait for its day. But I felt less alone knowing it existed, like a porch light left on at the end of a long walk. I packed the drive back into its pouch and placed it beside the watch. In the mirror over the motel sink, I saw a woman with a red nose and steady eyes. I touched the glass with my fingertips. It was cool and real. Outside the window, dusk had started. The sky held that gray that makes streetlights glow early. I stood in the middle of the room and practiced saying a sentence out loud. Not for a judge, not for Andrew, but for the bones in my back. The law is my backbone. I said it once, and the room did not tilt. I said it again, and it sounded like truth. I said it a third time, and I felt taller. They came in the evening just as the motel parking lot turned blue with the last light. I heard the knock, 3 hard raps that rattled the thin door. When I opened it, Andrew stood in the hallway with his coat collar pulled high. Victoria a half step behind him, her lipstick sharp against the cold. He carried a briefcase. She carried a smile meant to look reasonable. Mother, Andrew said, voice too calm, we need to talk. I let them in because fear does not get to lock my door. The room shrank around their presence. Victoria sat on the single chair without asking. Andrew placed the briefcase on the bed, snapped it open, and slid a neat stack of papers toward me. This is a settlement, he said. A way out for All of us. I did not touch the papers. Explain. You keep the lake house, Andrew said quickly. You keep 5 million in clean assets. He glanced at Victoria, then continued. We handle the rest. The accounts, the stocks, the money that might not be as pure as Whitman thinks. We take responsibility. You walk away safe. Victoria leaned forward, her tone silk over steel. Eleanor, this is generosity. We could push harder. We could fight in court for years. But this way, you have security, comfort. You get the home. You love and enough money to live well. And you avoid complications. I looked at the papers. Clean assets. A stipend carved out of my husband's life as though I were a dependent child. Complications, I repeated. Andrew's jaw flexed. Dad was not perfect. He had accounts, dealings. Some money isn't clean. If you push, if you keep everything, the FBI will come. They'll dig. They'll drag his name through the mud. They'll take everything. I'm trying to protect you from that. My breath stayed slow. You told me last week I was useless. Now you say I need protecting. Which version is true? He shifted. Both. You don't understand the scale of this. You never did. Dad left a mess under all that meticulous paperwork. Trust me, if the Bureau uncovers it, you'll lose more than money. His reputation, your peace, it will all be gone. Victoria reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. Eleanor, please. You're a good woman. You don't want to spend your last years in courtrooms battling over things you can't control. Take the house. Take the 5 million. Let us manage the rest. Quietly, discreetly, their words filled the small room like smoke, thick and cloying. I thought of the USB drive hidden in my bag, Charles's voice steady, reminding me that the law was my backbone. He had left files, statements, instructions. He had trusted me with the truth. I looked at Andrew, my son. His eyes darted, restless, calculating. He reminded me of the boy who once pulled the plug from his science project and tried to blame the dog. Except now the wires were millions and the lie could ruin lives. I need you to sign, Andrew pressed. Tonight. If you delay, the window closes. The Bureau is circling. This is the only chance to save something. Save who? I asked. He hesitated. All of us. I let silence stretch until it made him twitch. Then I spoke quietly. Even if every word you say is true, even if Charles left coins stained with dirt, I will not sell my dignity for a bargain. Not to you, not to anyone. Victoria's smile cracked. You're being naive. 5 million is more than enough for a woman your age. Why risk everything? Because everything without integrity is nothing, I said. Andrew slammed his hand against the bed frame. Stop talking like some saint. This is survival. You think Whitman can protect you when the Bureau starts asking questions. He'll step aside the second things get federal. Then where will you be? I held the pocket watch in my lap. The tick studied me. Even if I end up with nothing, I will not sign away the truth. I have survived with less. I have lived through grief, sickness, nights of fear. I can live without millions. I cannot live without myself. The anger drained from Andrew's face for a moment, leaving something raw, almost pleading. Why can't you just make this easy? Why can't you let me fix it? Because you are not fixing it, I said softly. You are burying it, and I will not climb into that grave with you. Victoria rose, gathering the papers with quick, sharp movements. This is your last chance, Eleanor. Refuse now, and you'll regret it when they take it all. I stood too, facing them. I regret only one thing, that I raised a son who thought his mother could be bought. Leave. Andrew's face hardened again. He snapped the briefcase shut. You'll regret this more than you know. They left, the door slamming against the thin frame, leaving the air vibrating. I sat back on the bed, the watch pressed against my palm, the tick louder than their threats. In my chest, the fear churned. Yes, but beneath it was something sturdier, a truth that would not bend. Even if every dollar vanished, I would not. Charles had said it himself. I was the frame, and frames are built to hold. I made the call the morning after Andrew and Victoria tried to corner me with their settlement. My hands did not shake when I dialed, though my chest carried the weight of dread. Whitman had given me a direct number to the bureau in case threats escalated. Ask for Agent Collins, he had said. He knows the broader picture. When I reached him, his voice was brisk, but not unkind. Mrs. Whitmore, I've been expecting you. Could you come downtown today? So I went. The federal building was a cold wall of glass and steel. Security scanned my bag, my pocket watch, even the small pouch with Charles's USB. Then I was escorted up to a conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Agent Collins entered with a slim folder under his arm, his suit plain, his eyes steady. He sat across from me, set the folder down, and spoke in a tone that was less interrogation than conversation. Mrs. Whitmore, he began, I need to tell you something that may change how you see everything. First, understand this. Charles Whitmore was not a criminal. He was an FBI informant for 12 years. I froze. Informant. Collins nodded. Deep cover. He cooperated with us on operations involving organized financial crimes. While on the surface, he appeared to facilitate certain money flows. In reality, he was gathering evidence, passing information, and helping us build cases. The accounts Andrew and Victoria are trying to frighten you with, those were part of a structured program. The money your husband left you was cleared by federal channels. It is legitimate. It is yours. I gripped the pocket watch so hard the chain pressed into my skin. He never told me. Of course he didn't, Collins said gently. For your protection. These operations required absolute secrecy. Even most local offices weren't aware. But every dollar he passed to you, every account he structured, it was monitored, documented, authorized. He was compensated through a cooperation agreement. That's why the estate appears complex. But let me be clear, the funds are lawful. Your husband was not laundering for his own gain. He was helping us dismantle networks. Tears slid down my face before I could stop them. Not the bitter tears of betrayal, but something else. Relief, pride, grief braided together. All this time, I thought maybe they were right, that Charles had hidden shame, that the fortune was tainted. Collins shook his head. No, the only ones tainted here are Andrew and Victoria, twisting half-truths into weapons. They knew just enough to scare you, but not enough to understand the reality. They tried to leverage fear. They're guilty of fraud and elder abuse. Your husband, on the other hand, is remembered here as one of our most valuable civilian assets. His information led to dozens of convictions. He kept entire cases alive by risking his reputation. I pressed my hand to my mouth, sobbing quietly. So he was protecting me even when he looked like he was excluding me. Collins's eyes softened. Yes. He was protecting you, Eleanor. He carried that role right to the end, and he left you secure. The room blurred, but through the tears I saw Charles's study again, the chessboard, the folders, the USB labeled for Eleanor. He had not only left me evidence of his foresight, but a bridge to the truth of his life. He had not been a man slipping into shadows. He had been the one holding a lantern in the dark. Collins slid the slim folder toward me. Here are redacted documents, authorization forms, operation logs, payments authorized under his informant contract. They're sealed for the public, but you may keep these copies. They prove the estate is legitimate. No agency will seize what you inherited. In fact, if anyone pressures you again with these falsehoods, call me directly. My hands trembled as I flipped the folder open. Dates stretched back over a decade. Phrases leapt out. Asset haze provided information leading to seizure. Payment authorized per cooperation agreement. Informant code 5173, I whispered. He was code 5173. Collins allowed himself a faint smile. Yes, and a damn good one. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the times Charles had seemed preoccupied with papers, all the evenings he'd muttered about consulting work, all the long drives alone. Suddenly, the pieces rearranged themselves into a picture that made sense. He had been carrying danger quietly so I wouldn't have to. He had never stopped shielding me. I wiped my cheeks, sat straighter, and asked the question that mattered most. Will Andrew and Victoria know this truth? They may suspect, Collins said, but we won't confirm it to them. They don't deserve that privilege. What they will know is that their manipulation has failed, and if they attempt to forge or tamper with documents, we will treat it as a federal crime. I closed the folder gently. Then I will not fear them anymore. Collins leaned forward. Good. Hold your ground, Eleanor. Charles trusted you too. And now we trust you to honor what he worked for. As I left the building, the winter air bit my face, but my chest was lighter than it had been in months. I stopped on the steps, pulled the pocket watch from my coat and opened it. The hands ticked steady, faithful. I whispered into the cold. You were never a criminal, Charles. You were a quiet hero. And now I know. I let the tears fall openly, not of despair, but of recognition. My husband's name had been cleared, his dignity restored, and with it mine. Agent Collins asked me to meet them at a neutral office, a small suite on the third floor of a building that smelled like floor wax and new paint. He said I would not be alone. I wore my plain gray coat with deep pockets and tucked Charles's pocket watch against my ribs. Last night's snow had turned to thin slush, the kind that licks at shoes and makes the city look newly scrubbed. I took the elevator up with a courier who watched the numbers instead of my face. The ride felt long enough for second thoughts, but I had already decided who I was going to be in that room. Andrew and Victoria were there when I stepped in. My son wore a navy suit that fit him like armor. My daughter-in-law wore winter white, her lipstick careful, her posture a verdict. A black briefcase sat before them like a pet they trusted more than people. They did not stand. Behind their shoulders, a framed photo of the river floated in gray light. Mother, Andrew said. The word had shape, but no warmth. Thank you for coming. This will be quick if everyone behaves like an adult. I took the chair at the head of the table, not the side seat they had left open. It mattered. Victoria slid a stack of papers toward me with 2 fingers, her smile trained to pass for kindness. This is the revised agreement, Victoria said. You keep the lake house as your permanent residence. You receive $5 million in liquid verified assets. We assume management of the remaining portfolio and any liabilities tied to historical transactions. In exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal complaints or make public statements that could damage the family. The settlement and mutual non-disclosure agreement sat at the top in a font that pretended to be gentle. The language wanted my silence, the way winter wants leaves. Andrew tapped a pen against the wood. Sign there and there, he said. We have a notary on call. This is how we end the mess. Exposure, I said, turning a page. That was your word last night. He leaned forward. If you keep fighting, the Bureau will tear through everything. You'll bleed money into fees, and they'll seize the rest. If you sign, you get security. We get discretion, and Dad's reputation stays intact. I folded my hands. I met with someone yesterday, I said. He doesn't think discretion is owed to people who lie. Victoria's fingers tightened around her pen. Who? I let the question fall between us and make its own gravity. The vents hummed. The pocket watch ticked a quiet metronome under my coat. Andrew exhaled through his nose. Mother, sign it. This is the lifeboat. The door opened. A man in a gray suit stepped in. Ordinary except for his timing. "The notary is 5 minutes out," he said, then closed the door. Andrew relaxed, mistaking choreography for luck. I reread the clause that mattered. I agreed to refrain from contacting law enforcement, a hook baked into bread. I set the stack down and squared the corners with the table's edge. "No," I said. Andrew blinked. "No is not an option. It's the only word I forgot to use for 40 years. I said. "No." The door opened again, not politely this time. 2 agents in dark jackets entered first. Behind them, Agent Collins, steady as weather. He held up his badge and a sheet of paper that looked both ordinary and absolute. "Andrew Whitmore. Victoria Whitmore. Federal agents. We have a search warrant for electronic devices and documents related to attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. To commit elder abuse. Keep your hands where we can see them." The air sharpened. Andrew half rose, then sat. Victoria's smile fractured. An agent moved to the briefcase. "Please step back, sir." The clasp clicked. Inside lay their careful future. "This is a misunderstanding," Victoria said quickly. "We're executing a voluntary family agreement. Collins didn't change pace. You attempted to coerce Mrs. Whitmore into signing an agreement designed to obstruct justice. You leveraged claims about illicit funds you knew or should have known were false. The estate funds are lawful. The agreement is not." Andrew turned to me like I had pulled a lever beneath his chair. "Mother, you can't do this to your own son." My body wanted to shake, but I would not let it. I kept my voice even. "You once told me I was useless. Today, you will learn what a mother is worth." He flinched. The agents worked quietly, photographing the table, gloving phones, sliding each thing into labeled sleeves. A third agent read rights in a cadence that put words where they belonged. The notary mercifully never arrived. Andrew tried a softer key. "Mom, say the word and they'll stop. Tell them we were helping you. Tell them you don't want charges." "Help doesn't start with a lie and end with my silence," I said. Victoria's calm peeled back. "This is vengeance." "This is accounting," I answered. "Please stand," an agent told Andrew. He rose with his chin high as if posture could edit reality. The cuffs flashed dull in the conference light. "Unnecessary," he said. "Procedure," the agent replied, fitting metal around his wrists with professional care. The small click landed like a period at the end of a long sentence. When they reached Victoria, she stared past us at the skyline photo, searching for a reflection she could bear. The bracelets were smaller, no less real. We waited while the agents finished logging items. Power shrank as labels grew. The briefcase looked smaller with a tag on it. The room was exactly the same as when I entered and entirely different. Collins handed me a card. "If they or anyone working for them contacts you again, call me directly. Charges will be filed today. Updates will go through your attorney." "Thank you," I said, and felt the truth of it bloom like heat. They led Andrew and Victoria out. The hallway stretched their footsteps thin. I sat. My hands were steady. The watch ticked its small, stubborn rhythm under my coat. Not triumph, confirmation. The receptionist peered in, eyes wide, then vanished. A car horn sighed 3 floors below. Somewhere, a copier started, then stopped. Ordinary sounds returned to the building, which behaved like it had seen worse and survived. I poured water from a carafe and held the glass without drinking. A man in a heavy coat hustled across the crosswalk with a bakery bag hugged close. The world didn't pause to applaud my reclamation. It made room for it and kept going. I thought of the motel heater that rattled while I told myself I would not beg to belong. I thought of Nora calling the house a witness. I thought of Charles's voice on the tiny speaker telling me the law is your backbone. A spine is not loud. It holds. Collins returned quieter. You handled that with grace. I stood. Still, I said, sometimes that's the work. It often is. He walked me to the elevator. We watched our reflections in the stainless panel. His composed mind plain and alert. A woman who had learned the weight of her own name. The doors opened to a lobby where a child in a red hat spun slow circles while her mother signed a clipboard. The guard nodded. Life kept its pace. Outside, the cold cleaned the last of the room from my lungs. I didn't hurry. I bought a soft roll from the corner bakery because habit remembers what comfort tastes like. I ate it at the window, steam fogging the glass, and let a short prayer assemble itself without poetry. Let truth keep its pace. Let justice mind the details. Let me stay the size that fits my soul. At the bus stop, I noticed my shoulders had lowered. The watch beat steady under my coat. A bus sighed up to the curb and opened its doors. I climbed the steps the way I always have, one sure foot and then the other. The driver nodded. I nodded back. I sat by the window and watched the city slip past. A florist taping a sign, a man salting a sidewalk, a dog tugging an owner toward a park. Ordinary life, precise as a clock. When the bus turned toward the lake, a pale band of light opened over the water. I pictured Charles's study emptied of files and turned into a studio, the windows unlatched at last, the air moving. I pictured mornings I would name for myself. I pressed my palm over the watch and let the quiet finish what the squad cars had started. I had answered my son in the only language that could not be rewritten. Paper. Time boundaries said without shouting. We rolled past my road. The trees hid the house the way they always have. A small mercy and a habit. Somewhere inside those walls, dust floated in winter light. The house remembers, Nora said. I believed her. I pulled the cord. The bell chimed. I stood. When the doors opened, the air smelled like salt and cold and beginning. I stepped down to the curb and felt the ground answer under both feet. The lake house was mine again, but it felt different when I unlocked the door. No longer a battleground, no longer a stage for Andrew's performance of entitlement. It was quiet, receptive, like a chest unlocked after years of holding its breath. I walked straight to Charles's study. The room had always belonged to him. Dark shelves lined with binders, chess pieces waiting in their frozen stalemate. Now it was time for it to belong to me. I cleared the desk, boxed his papers, set the chessboard gently in the closet. I opened the curtains wide, let the lake light flood the walls until even the shadows looked awake. Then I carried in the easel I had bought with my first independent check, a simple wooden frame still smelling of pine. I set out brushes, a palette, tubes of paint I hadn't touched in years. My hands shook with a kind of anticipation that had nothing to do with money. Sut. First stroke was hesitant, then another and another. The canvas filled with the shape I knew by instinct. A woman standing by a window, her back straight, her face lit by morning. No jewels, no ornament, only calm. The light in her eyes was not young, but it was unbroken. I painted for hours. When I stepped back, I recognized her. Not a saint. Not a victim, just Eleanor seen at last. Under the table, the pocket watch ticked in its velvet pouch. I had placed it there deliberately, as if time itself were keeping me company. Next to it lay an envelope I had addressed, but would never mail. The paper held words I needed to release. Andrew, I do not hate you. Hate would tie me to you in a way I refuse, but you chose to see me as useless. From now on, I choose to see myself as enough. I folded the letter and left it under the watch. Not for him, for me. A reminder that forgiveness does not always mean return. Sometimes it means drawing the line so clearly that even love cannot cross it without truth. As the afternoon light shifted across the floorboards, I rinsed my brushes, covered the canvas, and sat in the studio that had once been Charles's domain. The room felt lighter than it ever had. It no longer smelled of ledgers and strategy, but of paint, air, and possibility. I looked out the window across the water and felt the quiet kind of victory, one that does not shout, one that does not need an audience. It was not revenge I carried into that evening, but peace, the kind you earn only by refusing to sell your dignity. Nora came on a soft Sunday, carrying a paper bag that smelled like warm bread. She let herself in with the old knock she had always used. 2 light taps, a pause, one more for good measure. I met her at the threshold of the studio that used to be Charles's study. Sun off Lake Michigan spilled across the floorboards and caught the edges of the easel. The room was bright, the way truth is, bright when you stop dimming it for other people. She stood very still, eyes moving from the open curtains to the jars of brushes, to the canvas propped on the easel. The woman in the painting looked out of the window with a calm that was earned, not inherited. Nora took a breath like she was stepping into a clear morning and said, "Eleanor, this house finally breathes like you." I smiled and felt the line tuck itself inside my ribs like a promise kept. I moved to the small table by the window and poured tea into 2 cups that had waited too long in the back of a cabinet. She sat on the old chair Charles used to favor. I took the one we rescued from a thrift store, our first spring here. Outside, the lake carried a band of winter light that warmed the room as the kettles sighed between us. "I remember the old desk," Nora said, glancing at the corner where the chessboard used to live. "I thought it would always sit there. It lived a good life," I said. "But this room needed a window more than a desk." She nodded the way nurses do when a diagnosis is honest. "It suits you," she said, eyes going back to the painting. Quiet spine, steady light. I passed her a cup and we let the first sips do their work. "They came in cuffs," she said after a moment, voice low, more observation than gossip. "They did," I answered. I didn't celebrate. I stood. "That is a kind of celebration," she said. "When it is time to stop explaining, we listen to the house." It creaked the way old houses creak when they relax. The radiators hummed a song that had kept winters at bay since long before Andrew learned to tie his shoes. In the studio light, I felt the years stack and settle. The meals, the arguments delayed, the apologies that never arrived, the ones that did and mattered. The watch sat under the table in its velvet pouch beside the letter I had written for myself and not for the mail. "Are you going to send it?" Nora asked, because she has always guessed the questions I was asking in my head. "No," I said. "It tells the truth, but it is a truth for me. He has his own work to do." She reached across and touched the table edge. "You chose the right kind of mercy." We talked about ordinary things then, the bakery changing hands, the city salt-ruining boots, the neighbor's stubborn maple refusing to drop the last few leaves. When conversation circles like that, it lays down a kind of balm. I did not need to rehearse the past again. I had already handed it to the one place that knows what to do with it. The record. Nora rose and went close to the canvas. Her face, she said softly, isn't young, but it is free. Freedom is a quiet color, I said. You have to mix it yourself. She laughed and dabbed at her eyes with the corner of her scarf. Promise me you will keep painting. Not for a gallery, for the walls that held you. I promise, I said. This house deserves my mornings. We took our tea to the window and let the afternoon lean toward evening. The water outside changed shades. The way healing changes days slowly, then all at once, then slowly again. The calendar in my head stopped counting court dates and started counting light. I did not feel triumphant. I felt durable. There is a difference. Triumph flashes. Durability remains. Nora finished her tea and held my hand before she left. You did it the hard way, she said. The decent way. I did it the way I could live with, I answered. After she stepped out, I washed the cups and set them on a towel to dry. I wiped the window with a cloth until my reflection softened enough to be kind. The watch ticked below the table. The letter waited, patient and private. I lifted the canvas for one last look before covering it for the night. The woman by the window looked back with a steadiness I finally recognized as mine. As the sun dropped, the light made a path across the lake like a ribbon thrown toward the far shore. I stood in that light and let a closing thought rise, shaped for anyone who has ever been pushed from their own doorstep and then found their way home. Victory is not when you watch them fall. Victory is when you sit in the house they tried to take, pour tea into your own cup, and know you are still here. When you understand you are the one who writes the final chapter, that is enough. Before we say goodbye, we would love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning? With a warm cup of coffee or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude, and if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you next.